Thank you for listening to Living Our Best with Memory Loss.
Hi, I'm Bob Stryer, one of your podcast hosts. I do have mild cognitive impairment, MCI, and it was brought on by a stroke.
I'm Sue Ann Cobb. I'm one of your hosts. I have mild cognitive impairment due to having MS.
And I'm Dennis Lowe, also a producer of this podcast, and I have a diagnosis of young-onset, early-stage Alzheimer's disease.
I'm David Bollinger. They call me Debo. I run the equipment here so you can see and hear these guys. Welcome to our podcast, Living Our Best with Memory Loss.
The purpose of this podcast is for people to share their experiences with cognitive decline. It is not to provide medical advice. We are not doctors, and we stress that what might have worked for one person might not work for others. If anything you hear on this program inspires you to explore treatment options, we recommend you do so in consultation with your physician.
Hi, I'm Lori Stryer, and welcome to another edition of our podcast called Living Our Best with Memory Loss. Today, my co-host is Bob Stryer. And in an unusual but wonderful turn of events, one of our producers is our guest, and it is Dennis Lowe and his wife, Melissa. We thought it was important that you hear his story along with his caregiver's story, and that is Melissa, his wife. She's quite the extraordinary woman who is doing what a lot of folks who have loved ones with this diagnosis do, in that she is not only a great caregiver, but she also works. She is a grandmother. She is a mother, just playing many roles in this life. And she's wonderful, so I wanted everybody to meet both of them and hear Dennis's story as well. Dennis, just to give us some background for folks who haven't met you before, what is your diagnosis?
My diagnosis is something called young onset, or sometimes it's called early onset, early stage Alzheimer's disease. And young onset there's kind of an arbitrary line at age 65. If you have your diagnosis prior to age 65 or in your 65th year, you qualify for young onset, okay, which is earlier than most folks who are diagnosed. Mm-hmm. Late onset is anything north of 65 years of age. So most people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's are in their 70s and older.
Okay, Dennis, tell me, what were you before you had this diagnosis?
Well, I've done a number of things through my work career, mainly sold vehicles, trucks, trailers, lately furniture. So for the last 10 years or so, I did interior design and sold high-end furniture.
Very good. And Melissa, now I know that you're a caregiver and that you also work.
Full time.
And how does that work out for you to take care of this person?
It can be a bit stressful. I do everything I can to keep him as independent as possible. So even though he's retired, he still has jobs that he does around the house to keep him up and motivated and active. My biggest problem is having decompression time between work and coming back home to take care of things in the house.
I understand.
And with him.
Melissa, what do you do? So tell me a little bit about your background and what you do, and that you've always worked, or have you not? I know you have a beautiful daughter and granddaughter now, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have always worked. The job I'm in now, I've been there for 36 years. I am a purchasing agent for commercial dock equipment and residential garage doors, building specialty products. Love my job, or I obviously wouldn't be there this long. And continued to work full-time while we raised our daughter. and sent her all the way through school and through university. And now we split our time driving back and forth to Atlanta to see a beautiful, beautiful little grandson.
I think it's important that we also let the viewers and listeners know that Alex, your daughter, is responsible for this design, this layout.
She works in graphic design and decided just on spur of the moment to help Dennis out and do some graphics and some work for him.
We love it.
So now it's a centerpiece here on the set.
Yep.
So
Dennis, tell me, when you were diagnosed, what was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Also, what happened? Like, what brought you to be diagnosed? Were you seeing things, Melissa? What were you experiencing?
well, I've never had a stellar memory. Okay, I mean, my whole life, I've never had the greatest memory. But I began noticing probably age 62 or so, 63, I was starting to slip. And I was having more trouble at work doing presentations, doing involved projects that required lots of sources, lots of options, things like that. Just keeping everything together. I noticed that my ability to comprehend when I was reading, for pleasure, for work, was beginning to suffer. Over a couple of years, the physicals, probably when I was 63 and 64, I mentioned to my primary care physician that I was having problems remembering, and I was beginning to have problems articulating. But the referral wasn't made really until I was 65, and I had to leave work. I had to retire early because I had intended on working until I was 70 or older. I had to retire because I could no longer speak convincingly, speak compellingly, keep track of where I was in a presentation. Lots of dropped words while I was trying to communicate. So that's really what led to another trip to my primary care physician, and then finally a referral to a cognitive specialist.
So, Melissa, what did you notice was going on with Dennis?
I noticed a lot of the things that he said, in addition to when he would be at home, he would go to one room when he was intending to go to another room, or he would forget what object or what item he was going to get, or he would stop dead in his tracks and a blank look would come across his face. He couldn't remember what he was doing. And it comes and it goes. There's good days, there's bad days. The biggest thing, and I try to keep him independent, is his speech and communication skills. Dennis had a very extensive vocabulary, and he would forget a word, but in the back of his mind, he would have an excessive vocabulary that he could pull from and find a synonym, find another word that he needed. But it got to the point he couldn't find that. And I can always tell when he's having a good day or when he's having a bad day. On the bad day, there will be a stutter and there will be a loss of communication. On a good day, like today, you can't tell anything's wrong.
That's true. I kind of have the same problem. It's not that I forget where my keys are, but I decide that I'm going to go into my bedroom to do something. And I pick up and go to my bedroom. And when I get there, I have no earthly idea why I came in. Mm-hmm. I have that same problem. But if I just wait for 2 seconds and I think about it, it'll eventually come to me that, oh, yeah, that's why I came in for a shirt. But in the meantime, I really didn't know why I was in there.
There are some days, half the time, fully 50% of the time, where I intend to go somewhere into a room. I've lived in this house for 20 years. 50% of the time, I'm walking into a closet or walking into the bathroom when I meant to go onto the back porch. Another thing is, I'm not so keen on the space I occupy anymore. So I'm running into things. I never wore shoes in the house. I never wore shoes when I wasn't at work. Now I don't dare walk around the house without shoes on because I'm forever banging into stuff. Chair legs, table legs, because I don't really have a great sense of the space that I occupy in space. So,
And there was also a change in his gait. I can tell it's going to be a bad day when he gets up and he shuffles.
I experienced that with Bob.
We affectionately refer to it as the Tim Conway shuffle.
I love that you handle it with humor.
But you've got to have a sense of humor.
I so agree.
You have to have a sense of humor. We do make more memory jokes than are probably acceptable. But if he wakes up and he starts shuffling across the room and he hesitates when he says good morning, I know that there's going to be some issues going on that day.
I experienced the same thing with Bob. Except Bob is not aware. Right, Bob? You're not.
Most of the time, I'm not.
Now, Dennis is exceptionally aware. He is so self-aware, more so than me, really, but he's very self-aware of what he does, what he's skipping, what he's missing, and what he's doing.
Okay, Melissa. So when he was being diagnosed, what were you going through?
A mixed barrel of monkeys. Both of Dennis's parents died from Alzheimer's related illness. So we know with that fact that he was 7 times more likely to develop the disease. We knew there was a problem, we knew there was an issue, but we were finally able to get a definitive diagnosis, so we actually knew what we were up against. Even having that diagnosis, I don't like to say it this way, but it's almost, and it really is, and people that are affiliated with Alzheimer's know, it's a death sentence. It's a slow, prolonged death sentence. It's a disease that cannot be cured. It can be slowed somewhat, but it's inevitable. It's there. Now, granted, human nature, we are all going to die someday. But when you have that diagnosis, it's there. It's hanging over you, you know. And it's very traumatic. And you have to just pull yourself up and make a vow, both as the patient and as the caregiver, to take each day as it comes and do the absolute best you can with that day.
So I guess it goes back to living our best with the dementia.
Yes.
What do you do during the day, Dennis, to occupy yourself? Because you had not intended to retire early.
no. We were talking about that on the way home last night. It's funny. I mean, I take care of the yard. You know, mow the lawn, do all the weeding. You know, weed the beds. Do all of that. I also take care of the inside of the house, do house cleaning, that kind of thing. But
He reads a lot of books.
I read a lot of books, but it's interesting that things take so much longer now because everything has to be, all the steps, nothing flows anymore. Like unloading the dishwasher. Real simple thing. I mean, you pull out all the dishes and you stack them, you walk to the cupboard where those dishes all live, and you put them away. I'm doing them 1 and 2 at a time.
Yep.
Because I can focus on 1 or 2 dishes, even though there's half a dozen dishes all the same size and half a dozen dessert plates and then cups. Rather than taking the whole bunch and walking to this cupboard where they all go, I'm making half a dozen individual trips.
1 or 2 dishes each time, each trip.
Because that's all I can wrap my I can wrap my little mind around.
He
these
has to
days.
hyper focus on what he's doing.
I see. But it fascinates me. You're still a voracious reader.
Yeah.
I mean, you've read since January. And so right now we're in May. How many books have you read?
37.
No, I think 30. I think 33.
No.
Oh, just
30
33, Melissa.
30
You're off.
Yeah, 33.
Maybe it's Alex that's read 37.
Now, do you retain everything that you're
Oh,
reading?
no. I love to read because I've always been pedantic. I've always loved good writing, and I'll read with that in mind. So I'll read a paragraph, read a sentence, whatever, and I'll sit back and I'll say, "Wow, that was a great sentence. That was a really great paragraph." Her phrasing, her word uses was really exceptional in that case. But a page later, I don't remember what I read, but I really enjoy it as it's happening. So
Gotcha.
I'm not going to not do it.
Right.
That's so important.
So, yeah.
Dennis, they're also testing you were telling me about for Lewy body to see if you have that, right?
Right. That would be an additional dementia. So there's something called mixed dementia, where you exhibit symptoms of more than one dementia. Alzheimer's is the most commonly diagnosed dementia. 60% of the cases, I guess, is pretty well, most people agree on. Alzheimer's is a very progressive, very slow descent. There are identifiable stages. No one day is much different than the previous and is much different than, days that will follow. It's just a really, really slow diminishment. Lewy body dementia is a whole different story. It will cognitively mimic what you see with Alzheimer's: loss of memory, aphasia, which is the loss of ability to speak, which is what I suffer from. That particular symptom, which in itself is a diagnosis. So this is all very complicated. But anyway, Lewy body mimics some of Alzheimer's behavior, but you also have physical impairment. You have shuffles, you have stiffness, you have almost Parkinson's-like slowness of movement and stiffness. Your arms no longer swing, they stay at your side. You no longer have a relaxed gait like that. You're very much struggling to move. So that's part of it. So they're trying to detect whether I have some symptoms of Lewy body as well, and I go for testing on that here in the next couple of weeks.
How do they test for that?
They do a skin sample, which actually it's a puncture, most often done in the back of your neck, where they'll go in 3 millimeters or so, grab us a plug of skin, and now, and this is only recent, this is only in the last couple of years, they can detect from those skin cells whether you have a protein that is associated with Parkinson's or Lewy body.
Melissa, then you hear that. Thoughts? Is it incredibly overwhelming sometimes?
Yes.
Thank you so much for your honesty.
Yes, it is. And you have to learn to be able to compartmentalize. You cannot let what's going on in your personal life and at home and your disease affect your work. You have to be able to just pack it away, not think about it for a little while, go do your job, and then pack your job away and come in and do home.
Interesting you should say that because I struggle with that.
It's hard.
I think about it all day long. I
Mhm.
worry about him all day long because he is at home. I've spoken about it before. I check cameras to make sure he's okay. If he doesn't answer, I completely freak out. This is why I also put the cameras, but it's hard for me to compartmentalize.
You have to be able to utilize the cameras, air tags.
Mm.
Air tags are wonderful.
Go
And
find
it's,
me.
and it's with permission. I mean, he asked me to keep tabs on him so that if something happens, I know where he is and I can get help to him. Dennis made the decision himself not to drive a car. So he does not drive. So therefore, and I don't mean it as a burden, but that puts the added responsibility on me as primary transportation.
But then when you sit back and look at it, it certainly is better than the alternative.
Yes.
Right.
He basically told me, he said, if I get out and wreck and get hurt, that's one thing. But if I hit somebody else and somebody innocent is hurt or killed or suffers, that's another thing.
Right,
He said,
right.
I don't want to do that.
So many people are in this predicament.
So
Dennis,
many people are in the predicament. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we know a lot of folks who have cognitive impairment of different flavors, different diagnoses,
Mhm.
but
And
over
different-
half of them, yeah.
Different progressions
Yeah.
also.
Over
Right.
half of them that I know don't drive. They no longer drive. So it's a big thing.
And there was a point in time that we had to take the keys away from your father.
Yeah, he didn't give them up.
He did not.
He didn't give them up willingly.
No.
Why does that sound like somebody I know?
Dad, you just ran into the side of the house.
You moved the brick wall in about 6
Yeah.
inches. It's time
It's
stop.
time to time to take the keys away. So
I think that's a very difficult thing to take someone's keys away.
yeah,
It was.
It's because we've had it since we were able to drive.
right.
And it gives us a sense of freedom. It gives us a sense of
That's your independence.
independence. And when you take that away, that takes away 50% of who you are.
Yes, it does. And I understand that completely.
Dennis had told me that he's in some sort of test,
Clinical trial.
clinical trial.
Right.
And tell us about that.
Well, this is through here in town, Dr. Crane and Genesis Neuroscience. And it was a study that she is involved in or possibly heading up on using semaglutide, which everyone knows most folks are most familiar with as Ozempic, and they use it for weight loss. They're also exploring how it might slow cognitive decline. So we're doing that trial. Obviously, to be involved in a clinical trial, testing a drug, you don't want to confound the results by staying on previous medication. So I don't take anything but the test drug.
You've got a 50-50 chance of it being the real drug or a placebo.
Right. And of course, anybody who's involved in a clinical trial, there's a placebo group and there's a control group, or there's I think it's a control group. So you've got a 50% chance, or in some cases a 33% chance that you won't be on the drug. So, all these the daily routine of taking the drug ends up not helping you.
But we do have the option, if at any point he feels like he needs to come off the trial and go on to more traditional, already approved drugs, he can do that.
I was so curious how that worked.
He can pull out of the trial at any time.
Being involved in the trial at least gives me the satisfaction, whether I'm in the placebo group or not. It gives me the satisfaction that I'm doing something for
To further the research.
yeah, to further the research. How do they diagnose? There are there are some things that are really, really key to living well with this diagnosis. One is exercise. Okay, do whatever you can. That furthers brain health. That certainly furthers your heart and
Physical health.
physical health. The other thing is try to keep a good attitude. I mean, depression is an issue with a lot of folks who have this diagnosis. And thankfully, I've been spared that. I couldn't imagine this journey or taking this journey while depressed. With this diagnosis, I had a big personality change. I went from someone who was hyper-focused, very serious, not very nice, not very pleasant, to someone who's pretty happy. And it was really, really interesting. That was one of the first changes, really, before the memory loss started to exhibit and the word loss really started to exhibit. I just got happier. And that's really helped with this journey. I get up in the morning, I'm happy. There are some simple things that I do, like I play favorite music. I've been listening to opera. I've been listening to classical music. I've been listening to things that I hadn't traditionally listened to and enjoying them. So plus all the reading. So there's a lot of things that bring me a lot of joy, despite the diagnosis. So that's really important. That's really important. Somehow to find joy in some aspect of your life and really focus on that is going to be it's going to give you such strength on what is for most of us not a very pleasant journey.
I noticed Melissa smiling and through that whole bit of advice. Melissa, I love this podcast because it allows us to talk to caregivers as well. And I always am so curious about any kind of takeaway tips for folks who are caregivers, whose loved one has Alzheimer's or MCI. Any little tip or something you do? My obsession is the cameras all over my house, with the exception of the restrooms. But anything that you do or that you can tell a fellow caregiver, I love that you had said to compartmentalize. You've got to compartmentalize home life and work. It's something that I'm still trying to work on myself. But what else?
Be patient. Put yourself in your partner's shoes and try to understand what they're going through. Try to see it from their side of the fence and grow compassion.
Great advice. Thank you. Are you still working on that too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think we all are. Thank you so much for joining us. Dennis, Melissa, Bob, you did a great job. Really great job as a host.
Thank you for being here.
And Debo, thank you. And to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for continuing to come back to our podcast and supporting us.